Welcome to Age, Pension, Super and Retirement. I am your host Yvonne, and as always, this is information only and not personal advice. In today's episode, we will be looking at compounding, and to discuss this, I would like to welcome back the Director of Prosperity Planning Partners, Gayle McKew.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Very nice to hear your voice. So to begin with, if we were talking about investing, say, for our grandkids, what would some of the benefits of compounding be, just from a time point of view?
Well, you can start an investment with a set amount, then you can really do absolutely nothing more if you want to. And just if you're in bank interest, for example, and you just say, well, compound my investment, then you will have a very tidy nest egg at the end of time. However, all of the interest along the way will be potentially taxable if you have it in your own name. And if you have it in other types of investments, then potentially you will be able to have something that's tax-free, or you will have something that's tax-free with an inclusion of capital appreciation. So while people talk about the power of compounding, as somebody who's been investing for longer than they've been financial planning, don't always worry about the power of compounding. I worry about the potential capital appreciation that I can get, because what I look at is the fact that my money does not buy anywhere near as what it used to. So for $100 now, I can spend that on filling up a car with fuel. I used to be able to buy a full trolley load of groceries and feed my family for a week. That's 20 odd years ago. Now I am buying $100 worth of groceries and walking out with one, maybe two bags of groceries. So for me, it's not just about compounding. It's about the impacts of all of the things that we have to consider as living, breathing humans surviving in a society where there is capital inflation and taxes, that just because you think compounding should be the way to go, it may not be the best way to go for you.
Ooh, we'll have to unpack that, and you can go wide there in this conversation for sure. But could I just touch on what is the tax for minors? Is there sort of a penalty tax rate?
Yeah, there is a penalty tax rate. And this is a really weird story, but it is actually something that started off way back. And there's a story to go with this one. It's the ATO. We're trying to figure out what minor tax rate should be. And this guy happened to be part of the team, and his son was earning at the time $9 a week doing a paper round. And he went, oh, he shouldn't have to pay tax on that. That's how the tax-free threshold for a minor came about, which is between $0 and $416 is zero tax rate. Between $417 and $1,307, they want to tax that part at 66 cents in the dollar of the amount over $416. And then if they hit over $1,307 as earnings in the year, the tax rate is 45%.
That's interesting, Gayle. And now for the next question, feel free to answer as broadly as you like. Now,
I do. Sorry.
And I'm loving this. I understand the average life expectancy for a couple that are now 67 shows that one has a good chance of living into their 90s and the other to 100. With this longevity in mind, could you talk a bit about investing?
Reality of it is longevity is increasing for a number of reasons. I remember being stunned many years ago, because I'm now 63, and they asked, I was at a professional development day, and they said at the time, is there anyone in the room who's 50? And I went, oh, yes, because I'd just turned 50. And they said, well, there's a very strong probability that you may live to 150. And I went, crikey. I'm thinking, oh, with my gene pool, maybe not. But they were talking about the medical advances that are expected to be impacting people's well-being, people's life expectancy is just going to increase dramatically. So there's, as you said, there's statistics around that prove that if you've got two 67-year-olds, one is likely to make it into their 90s, the other one into the hundreds. So as financial planners, we have to start to have those conversations with people, because while you might live to that age, you may or may not have the physical well-being or the mental acuity to be able to stay at home on your own. So we have to plan for the cost of aged care.
Yes, and that's something that we'll touch on again shortly. So for those of us retiring in our 60s, would they usually, in part at least, be investing aggressively because of what you mentioned?
I've got clients up into their 80s who are still including growth assets in their portfolio, because if you go too conservative, you will run out of money before you run out of breath and your heart stops, which will then effectively change your lifestyle. And it will not only change your lifestyle, it will change your capacity to provide future inheritances for your kids. There's all sorts of things.
So before we touch on the costs of aged care in connection to this, did you want to just talk a little bit more broadly about compounding as only part of the story?
God love them, my parents-in-law, when they retired, they were in the capacity of getting 18% plus on their term deposit, because at that point inflation was running rampant, and they basically went, oh, okay, I'm going to just let this do what it does and I won't need to take any investments. It'll be fine. Like any investment risk, I should say. They were basically thinking, oh, yeah, this will be fine. But within a very short period of time, when interest rates had gone from 18% down to, say, 10% as they were in the early 90s, because they retired in the 80s, you could see that they suddenly went from just going 18%, no risk, this is gold, we'll be able to survive on this forever, to suddenly have to include assets that had tax efficiencies and growth potential in the portfolio. So they actually went from being 100% term deposits, because that's all they'd ever known, to suddenly including, and this was before I started to plan, by the way, they had started to include growth assets. So property securities and Australian shares and international shares were included in their portfolio. Yes, it did extend the value of their investment. It didn't do that much.
We had a series on aged care. Would you just mind touching on the costs of that again as a reason for perhaps why retirees may want to compound or invest in some way with this in mind?
The cost of aged care, I have been providing advice around aged care since around 2008. And this is the fifth version of aged care fees. And the most recent one has seen it increase dramatically in cost. It's crazy. So what previously would have happened if somebody had $2 million worth of assets, they would have paid a certain fee. Now we're seeing those sort of fees being incurred and more by people who've got $1 million worth of assets. So this is something that you need to be thinking about, particularly if there's only one of you left. If there's two, then the house is exempt while that second person is capable of staying at home and living in the house. That's a great outcome, because it shelters the true value of the house, which most houses these days are in the order of $1 million plus. That's just for an average house. I have seen a beautiful house just recently on the Gold Coast owned by one of my friends. They're selling it to move, and it's valued at $4.5 million. Housing prices, you could be living in a caravan, that might be your house, but you could also be living in a $20 million property. If somebody's still living in that house, that home of yours that has previously been identified by Centrelink as your home, then guess what? That actually stays as an exempt asset. And that changes the way aged care is impacted. So there's so many things to consider when you're investing for retirement. It's not just, oh my God, I'm going to spend it all, because when you do spend it all, you lose a lot of choices. And the reason I'm saying you lose a lot of choices, people have still the view that the government will pay for aged care. They don't necessarily pay for everyone's aged care in full. If you've got less than about $65,000 worth of assets, they will make it so that you don't have to pay any contributions towards additional accommodation costs, like a refundable accommodation deposit or a daily accommodation charge. What that means is there are limited places available that are government supported. So we have to be super careful that you don't give away or spend all your cash with the view to being able to be government supported, because you may not be able to find a bed when you need one.
And so what you were saying, if there's one person left of a couple or a single person, their principal place of residence will come into this now.
If a single person, yes, but as a member of a couple and one person is still staying at home, the house will continue to be exempt. But this has been the way it has been forever. It's just that when there is a single person, that changes everything, because then all of the assets become part of the overall available assets for consideration.
And is there an upper limit of how much someone can pay if they had an expensive principal place of residence, a couple of million worth, for example?
Well, the RADs are identified in accordance with agreements with the government. So most of them these days are on average around the 750,000 to $1 million. That doesn't require any special request to the government to confirm that value. That's standard pricing. And then we go the other side of the coin, where I know that the biggest RAD in place at the moment in Australia is $3.4 million.
Wow. Gayle, how can you be reached?
Oh, you can call me on 0407 159 298, or you can email me on gayle@prosperityplanning.com.au. I will get back to you. I may not take your call straight away, but I will get back to you.
Thanks so much. And just to finish up here, staying on aged care for a moment, Gayle, could you just mention the indexing that started in November of 2025 and what that's all about?
Indexing of RADs, yes. If they're not paid in full, they index. Every 6 months, in March and September, daily care fee changes. It increases in line with the pension increases. Other costs are increased as well. So what was a standard $750,000 RAD could now be $758,000, because that has been indexed. We're starting to see unusual amounts come through, because they were always around $10,000. The cost of care is continually increasing, and it's not going to get any cheaper.
Yes, look, this is why we did the aged care series, and it's just something that I guess unfortunately comes up for a lot of people, and it's what you are good at planning around.
Yes, I realised the other day I've been doing aged care for almost 18 years now. Every time it changes, it's an absolute mind game to get your head around it again, because the changes are sometimes subtle, but they're also sometimes quite significant. For example, in November last year, they introduced 3 additional costs that can be incurred. So there's now a hotelling fee that was never there before. And the hotelling fee basically is an amount over and above the daily care fee. So they haven't increased the daily care fee too much, because it applies to people who were grandfathered in the old version, as in pre-1st of November 2025. So their daily care fee goes up. But anyone who moved in after 1st of November 2025 is now also paying a hotelling fee.
That's so helpful, Gayle. And I think being a part of this group, a lot of people are aware of gifting rules for age pension, but it's just dawned on many that it also affects aged care.
It does indeed. And we advisors talk, and I don't mean that in a bad way. We share information. And I was speaking to a provider recently, and they indicated that Dad had sold his house. They'd gifted the money to the kids, and then they expected to get an aged care bed, but the kids didn't want to give Dad the money back.
Oh dear.
So Dad lost his pension. Dad also couldn't be in an aged care facility because they couldn't afford to pay for the cost of care. So it's really not something that you can just say, well, stuff it, I'm going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You need to go, what are the implications of this?
Yes, such good points, Gayle. Thank you so much. As always, this has been information only and not personal advice. For our international listeners wishing to join our Facebook group, the code word is yellow. And thank you so very much, Gayle.
Thank you very much for having me.